Sound check, good? Good. Okay, 3, 2, 1, roll. Hello and welcome to 1 Minute Fiqh, where we answer your fiqh related questions. Now today's question is about, can you pass in front of somebody praying, and who incurs the sin, the one passing or the one praying? First of all, most people understand that the one who's praying, his prayer breaks. So rest assured, your prayer will not break no matter who passes in front of you, whether it's your fault or their fault, your prayer will not break. However, you may be sinful or they may be sinful, depending on the following scenarios. So scenario number 1, George, so you're in a mosque now and you've got George here, and George is praying in a part of the mosque where there's no obstruction and people can pass either in front of him or behind him. Now Humphrey wants to pass. If Humphrey decides to pass in front of him, Humphrey is sinning. Why? Because Humphrey could have passed behind him. So if Humphrey passes behind him, neither are sinning. Now if George happens to pray in an area where it's by the door or it's right at the end where it forces people to pass in front of him, now those people have no choice. If they pass in front of him, they're not sinning. Humphrey doesn't sin and his buddies don't sin, but George does sin. The other scenario is if George happens to pray by the front door or in an area where he knows there's going to be an obstruction, but there's nowhere else to pray, there's nothing he can do. In that area, in that situation, he's praying. Now if Humphrey decides to pass, Humphrey also knows that I have no other option but to pass in front of him. In this situation, neither Humphrey is sinning and neither George is sinning, because they simply couldn't help it. However, all of these situations, situation 1, 2 and 3, are resolved if George decided to put a sutra in front of him, which is a stick that is about an arm's length and as thin as a finger. If he puts something of the equivalent of this in front of him and prays, number 1, it's recommended to do if he knows that there's a possibility that people will pass. So this will then allow anybody to pass in front of that place, whether he's by the front door, whether he's in the last, like right at the back of the mosque, or whether he's anywhere in the mosque. It's always a good idea to do this. If you have no stick, if George has no stick or nothing that he can place there, then just to draw a crescent perpendicular line in front of him is enough to show the people that he's praying. Now, George is in a mosque and he forgot to do this, and Humphrey wants to get past. Now, George is praying in the middle of the mosque. At what distance would it be fine for Humphrey to pass in front of him with, for Humphrey to pass in front of George without incurring sin? So George has done nothing wrong. He's prayed in an area where he knows people can pass in front and behind, and he is safe. But Humphrey wants to know what's the closest he can be. So there is a difference of opinion on this, but they say that if you're in a mosque 20 meters by 20 meters, that's quite a large space, it's not a room, then Humphrey should pass that much in front of George that if George is looking down at his place of sajda, which is about here, and then where the the outskirts of his vision would naturally go, so his secondary vision, how far that would go. So that would normally go another saf, another place of prostration in front. So that would be like 2 prostrations. However, because there's a difference of opinion on this, it's always better to pass behind. And for Humphrey to be mindful, and for George also to be mindful where he stands to pray. If George is praying in a small room, then there's no room for this dispensation. Then Humphrey has to either pass behind him or wait till he's praying. There's a hadith by Rasulullah that had the one passing the one praying known of the punishment, he would wait up to 40. He would deem it better to wait up to 40. And the narrator said, I don't know whether it was 40 days, months, weeks, or what. And there is another opinion that it was 40 years. So that's the severity, whether it's 40 minutes, whether it's 40 days or 40 months, even 40 minutes to wait for someone to pray is a long time when you know that in 5 minutes they'll finish anyway. So it's a very severe reprimand on walking past a praying person. Now regarding putting your hand out and stopping them, it's recommended not to do that. You are taking away from your prayer if you do that. So if they're going to pass, they're going to pass. However, what you can do is you can raise your voice a little bit. you can say Subhanallah, or you can like through an eye gesture quickly like that and looking down, like he gets the idea you're praying. Your eye movement has made him look at your face, and he can see that you're reciting. It's better to do this, but it's not good to combine all of these together. So at the end of this, George can be content that he made a good prayer and didn't disturb anybody, and Humphrey could be content that he didn't disturb George or anybody else, and he didn't curse in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.